Hello, good evening. I am the friend who keeps telling you stories, Mr. Dread. Without further ado, let's start today's story. It was a dark night and an old Iveco van was driving on a dirt road leading to the suburbs. It was so quiet inside the car that the only sound was the low roar of the engine. Neither of the two people in the car spoke, and the air seemed to freeze. After leaving the city, the car drove onto a section of National Highway and then turned into this rugged country road. The car body kept shaking, as if it was thrown out of the edge of the city by time. Noah, who was sitting in the passenger seat, felt increasingly uneasy. He tightly grasped the door handle and glanced sideways at the driver. A middle-aged man with dark skin and deep brows, who called himself Uncle Chun. It all happened so suddenly. I just mentioned the accidental death of my friend, and this person came to my house and insisted on taking me to see the truth. Am I crazy? Noah cursed at himself in his heart. Why did I get into a stranger's car? The wheels rolled over a huge pothole, and Noah was almost hit by the car window. He suppressed his panic and asked carefully, "Where are we going?" Uncle Chun said nothing and just continued driving. The atmosphere became increasingly weird, so Noah simply found another topic. "How long have you been doing this?" This time, Uncle Chun finally turned his head slowly and glanced at him, with a smile on his face. "Young man, don't be afraid. I'll take you to see what you want to know." Noah was about to ask, "What do I want to know?" But the words got stuck in his throat. The more he thought about it, the more confused he felt. He paused, then changed the subject and asked, "Is this car of yours just recently driven to our neighborhood? I don't think I've seen it before." Uncle Chun nodded. "It started on the day of your friend's funeral." "Ah!" Noah was shocked. Why? Uncle Chun suddenly fell silent. No matter how Noah asked, he stopped talking and just stared straight ahead. The more Noah thought about it, the more panicked he became. His hands reached for the steering wheel involuntarily. "I'm not going anymore. Stop the car. I want to go back." Before he could finish his words, Uncle Chun slammed on the brakes and the car came to a sudden stop. If Noah hadn't been wearing a seatbelt, he would have almost hit the front windshield. "We're here," Uncle Chun said lightly. Noah was stunned and looked up, only to see darkness ahead and a low, dilapidated village hidden in the rainy night. Just as he was about to ask, Uncle Chun had already jumped out of the car and walked towards the village. Noah looked back at the darkness behind him, and then thought of the sudden break just now. He hesitated for a few seconds, but still quickly followed. "Hey, Uncle Chun, where's this place? Why are we here? I have to go to work tomorrow." Uncle Chun continued walking as if he didn't hear anything. Noah kept jogging while complaining, and they soon walked into a courtyard. It was an old house that had been in disrepair for a long time, with mottled low walls. The heavy wooden door was pushed open with a creaky sound. A young woman was standing in the yard. Noah didn't think he was a person who was attracted by beauty, but when he saw her, he felt a sense of familiarity and intimacy. The woman was not stunning, but her features were delicate and well-proportioned, and her fair face was flushed with a gentle blush. Her black hair was casually scattered. She was wearing a simple home dress and furry slippers on her feet. With a smile, she looked like someone who had walked out of an old dream. It was a familiarity that seemed like something I had seen thousands of times but never met. "Uncle Chun, Why are you back so late today?" As soon as she finished speaking, she noticed that there was a strange man standing next to her. She immediately lowered her head shyly, turned around and hid in the house. Uncle Chun ignored him and walked straight into the house. Noah hesitated for a moment and followed him in. The old house was simply furnished, with dim lights reflecting the roof beams. An old table was placed in the middle of the main room, with a white porcelain teapot and a few small bowls on it. There was a bedroom on each side, with a curtain embroidered with carp hanging at the door. There were candles lit in the innermost hut, and the woman from before was busying herself inside with her head down, apparently making a fire and cooking. Uncle Chun sat down and pointed to the stool opposite. "Sit down." As soon as Noah sat down, Uncle Chun spoke. "This is my home. When I was young, I had a wife and children, but then I had a car accident and I was left alone. The girl just now is my brother's child, named Shinya. She was only 3 years old that year. Both her parents were gone, so she lived with me. Now she is in her 20s, and it is time for her to get married." Noah listened to this and felt that Uncle Chun was hinting at something, intentionally or unintentionally. But he couldn't respond directly. The shy smile just now appeared in his mind unconsciously, and he felt an indescribable touch in his heart. Soon, Shinya came in with a pot of hot water and carefully refilled the teapot with hot water. She glanced at Noah secretly, her eyes shining, and then hurriedly lowered her head and walked briskly back to the kitchen. Noah looked at her back and felt a little warm. He wanted to continue asking Uncle Chun about what happened in the car, but Uncle Chun seemed to be avoiding the question. Shinya then brought a few more dishes and a pot of hot wine, quietly placed them on the table, and turned to leave. The wind was blowing outside. The firewood in the fire pit was crackling, but inside the house it was warm like spring. Noah usually had a good alcohol tolerance, but maybe because he was mentally exhausted, or maybe the wine was too strong, he felt dizzy after just a few drinks and fell asleep on the table. In a daze, he felt cold all over, as if he had a fever, and floated lightly in the darkness. He couldn't remember where he was or why he came, but he knew that there was always a pair of gentle hands around him, changing his water, feeding him medicine, wiping his forehead, and taking care of him. He woke up several times, and every time he opened his eyes, he saw Shinya standing by his side, gently wiping the sweat from his forehead, testing the temperature of the water in the spoon with her mouth, and then bringing it to his lips. There was no trace of boredom in her eyes, only undisguised tenderness and heartache. At that moment, Noah suddenly felt that he seemed to have found the home he had never had. The next morning, when Noah woke up, it was still dark. He lay on the Kong, his head still a little heavy, but his body was much more relaxed than last night. There was a bowl of warm water next to his pillow, which was obviously prepared by Shinya at night. He stood up and walked into the main room. The lights were still on and Shinya was sitting at the table, in a daze. Seeing him come out, she quickly stood up, her face slightly red, opened her mouth, and then lowered her head silently. Noah whispered, "Thank you for your hard work." The two of them looked at each other in silence. The room was so quiet that they could hear the sound of the wind blowing through the window paper. After a while, Shinya whispered, "Uncle Chun went out to work." Then she lowered her eyes and rubbed the corner of her clothes with her fingertips. Noah wanted to say something else, but when he opened his mouth, he said, Will you marry me?" As soon as he said this, he regretted it. He was afraid that this abrupt question would be misunderstood as frivolous and rude, and his face turned red. Shinya was stunned for a moment. Her face flushed all the way to her ears. She stood with her head down, like a flower branch that would run away if the wind blew. After a long while, she nodded gently, whispering, "Yeah." Noah was stunned for a few seconds before he came back to his senses. He was surprised but afraid that he had heard it wrong. So he was about to ask more questions when he saw Shinya running back into the house with a red face, like a deer that had been suddenly spotted. He sat in the main room, not coming to his senses for a long time. Their matter was soon put on the agenda. Although the process was not necessarily grand, it was still well-behaved, visiting relatives on both sides, preparing for the wedding and hanging up lanterns and decorations. For the first time, Noah felt that fate had really taken pity on him, giving him a home, a solid and warm life, and no longer being lonely. Uncle Chun did not attend the wedding. Shinya explained that Uncle Chun was afraid that she would be sad and didn't want to see her get married. Although Noah was a little disappointed, he still comforted Shinya. "We will go to see him together after we get married." She nodded, but a hint of complexity flashed across her eyes, which disappeared in an instant. The night after the wedding, the two of them were lying on the Kong and talking quietly. Noah suddenly asked about the first time he came to her house, but before he could finish, Shinya interrupted him. "Let the past be the past. Let's live our own lives from now on. Okay?" She looked at him, her eyes earnest and vulnerable. Noah originally had a lot of questions, but at that moment, he nodded. "Okay. Let's not talk about it." The days after marriage were gentle and peaceful, as if they were the only two people left in the world. Shinya always gets up early to prepare meals for him to come home. No matter how tired Noah is from work, as long as he sees her waiting for him at the door, all his tiredness disappears. She never complains and never cares. When he is happy, she laughs with him. When he is depressed, she sits quietly by his side and listens to him talk. Occasionally, she wakes him up with a word and makes him feel relieved. Noah often thought, this is the life he has longed for countless times in his dreams. A small but warm home with cooking smoke, hot water, and someone waiting for him. But the longer happiness lasts, the clearer the unresolved gap in one's heart becomes. Some details always linger in his mind. Uncle Chun disappeared completely after the wedding. Shinya never mentioned going back to her parents' home or the past. Whenever he mentioned the dirt road, the hearse, or even Riku's death, she would remain silent and then evade the question. Noah began to feel that the untied thread might be holding something that he should not forget. Until that day, he returned from a business trip and passed the familiar national highway at dusk. The fork in the road was right in front of him. Looking at the muddy dirt road, memories flooded back to him, and he suddenly decided to find out what was going on. Noah drove down the familiar dirt road. The evening breeze mixed with cold rain, crackling against the windshield. The sky became darker and darker, and the vision ahead became increasingly blurred. He remembered that this road only led to that village, and that's how he had driven straight into it. The car jolted over a deep pothole. The body of the car shook violently, and then it stalled. The engine let out a few weak groans, and the wheels slipped and spun in the mud, but wouldn't move. Noah cursed, feeling uneasy. He checked his phone, which had run out of battery. He had no choice but to open his umbrella, carry a flashlight, and walk to the village to find help. The rain was getting heavier. The flashlight flickered in the wet fog, and the surroundings were as dark as sinking to the bottom of a lake. He walked quickly forward, but found that the road seemed to have become longer, and he didn't see the familiar yard after walking for a long time. His foot slipped and he fell to the ground. As he was struggling to get up, a flash of lightning streaked across the night sky. Not far away, there was a field of undulating mounds, one after another, all of which were desolate graves. A cold wind blew in his face with the smell of wet earth, and Noah's heart skipped a beat. It was a premonition that was more chilling than the cold itself. The vision he saw in the hearse that night suddenly emerged in his mind: Riku, the woman in the red wedding dress, and the fear that tore apart reality. He turned around and wanted to run away, the rain running down his cheeks and into his neck. His breathing became rapid. But when he turned back, the two familiar yet strange figures were standing quietly in the rain not far away. The red dress was particularly eye-catching in the lightning. The female ghost still had that sinister smile on her face, tightly holding a boy who was crying heartbreakingly, "Riku, help me! Noah, help me!" Riku's cries sounded like they were dug out from the ground, sharp and helpless. Noah ran, not caring about the mud that soaked his pants or the pounding of his heart. He desperately ran through the rows of abandoned graves, like a beast on fire, just wanting to escape from this ghost land. Suddenly, he stopped in front of a tomb. A blank tombstone stood there alone, with only a yellowed black and white portrait pasted on the tombstone. Lightning flashed. The person in the photo was Uncle Chun. How is it possible? Noah's throat tightened and a cold sweat broke out on his back. Just then, he heard a low sob behind him. He turned around suddenly. Shinya stood in the rain, her wet dress clinging to her body, her face pale and her eyes sad. She whispered, "Why did you come here?" Noah murmured and shook his head, his eyes empty. What is going on? Uncle Chun, isn't he still alive? You know the answer. Shinya's voice was a little sad. You have been avoiding it and refusing to accept it. Didn't you say you wanted a home? You wanted someone to accompany you, so you wouldn't be lonely or wandering anymore. Don't we already have it? Her voice became softer and softer, as if it was drifting away with the wind in the rainy night. But now that you're here, everything is about to end. She raised her head, eyes full of reluctance. I'll send you back and continue to live well. After saying that, she turned around and rushed towards the woman in red. The female ghost was startled, as if disturbed by something, and immediately let go of Riku and tried to escape. But Shinya had already pounced on him. The two of them fought each other, and in the wind and rain, there were lightning and thunder, and one lightning after another struck them like a punishment from heaven. Noah watched helplessly as the familiar figure trembled violently in the lightning, and was eventually engulfed by the lightning and fire along with the red shadow. He rushed forward screaming, but as he ran his eyes went dark and he fell heavily into the mud. In the last moment before he passed out, he saw a dim car light piercing through the rainy night. The hearse stopped in the wilderness. Uncle Chun sat in the driver's seat, smiling and waving at him. When Noah opened his eyes again, the ceiling of the hospital came into view. He lay on the white hospital bed. The sound of ticking clocks was heard. The sun shone in from the window, and he felt a long-lost sense of peace. When I turned my head, I saw Riku in the next bed slowly opening his eyes. The moment they looked at each other, there was a flash of shock in each other's eyes. It was as if I had experienced the exact same dream. Memories quickly flooded into my mind. That rainy night, that desolate graveyard, the red wedding dress, Uncle Chun, Shinya. Every scene was so real, yet it seemed as if it had happened in another world. We are all still alive? Rika's voice was hoarse. Noah nodded, then shook his head. I'm not sure. After a moment's silence, they almost simultaneously remembered the car accident that night. Yes, they drank too much that day. Riku was in a bad mood, and Noah accompanied him. The two talked about their secrets for a long time on the dim highway, about the broken relationship and the loneliness in their hearts. As they were talking, they got drunk and drove away when the car crashed into an old tree. At that moment, their world seemed to be shattered. When I woke up again, I was in the hospital. Everything seemed like a dream, too long and too real, so real that they remembered every detail of the dream. Rika whispered, I dreamed. I married her, the woman I had always thought about, but she changed. She became scary, like an evil spirit. Noah did not respond immediately. He just looked at the sunshine outside the window and said softly, I also dreamed of a home I have longed for, a place with food, laughter, and people. But maybe I never figured out whether I was chasing home or escaping. The two were silent for a long time, until the nurse came in to change the dressing, bringing them back to reality from their thoughts. After being discharged from the hospital, they went to the place where the accident happened that day. The old tree still stood by the road, its branches as old as ghost claws. But Noah was stunned. There were no forks in the road, no dirt roads, and certainly no dilapidated village. The path in that memory seemed to have never existed. They heard that this section of the national highway was indeed a cemetery before it was built. When the graves were moved, they were registered and the compensation was handled clearly. But later, there was a rumor that there was an unclaimed old coffin under the old tree, which was dug out when the road was built. Whose coffin is it? Noah asked. The worker shook his head. No one knows. Maybe the woman in red, Riku said. It could also be Uncle Chun, Noah added in a low voice. Riku looked back at him. And that, Shinya. They looked at each other for a moment, and no one answered. Perhaps, lying in the coffin are every real yet vague shadow in their dreams. The woman who had saved him, accompanied him, moved him, and frightened him. Who was she? Why did she appear? Why did she disappear? Perhaps no one will ever know the answer. Noah looked back at the old tree one last time. The wind blew, and the leaves rustled, as if some distant voice was whispering. Didn't you say that the past should be left in the past? That's all for today's story. I am Mr. Dread, a friend who will accompany you into the night with stories. If you have experienced something similar, please leave your story in the comments section. We see you in the next story.